Hi folks, we're going to continue on with photosynthesis. We're going to look more at the nitty-gritty of what's happening inside of the cells in regards to how these autotrophs, our plants, are making their own food. So kind of looking at the overall idea here, we ended off here where we're looking at a big old tree, which is obviously an autotroph. And what they are going to be doing is they're taking in solar light, so energy light in the form of solar energy, and they're actually taking what we call the photons from that solar energy. And we're going to also use a couple other reactants. We're going to basically take carbon dioxide from the environment. The gas will go in through the cells of the leaves to take in that gas that we need. And we're also going to be using the photosynthetic plants, are also going to be using the water that they have been either stored in their trunk or might be currently in the root system. So those are our three reactants. And through a very complex, which we're going to learn a little bit more about it, process, we are going to be making new products. And so the one product, it's kind of a byproduct that the plant does not need, is the oxygen molecules, and those oxygen molecules that are leaving the plant going out into the atmosphere for everyone else to use. And then the sugar that's made is in the form of glucose, which is really important because that's the fuel that the cells are going to use for energy, or they're going to store them for needing them later on at some point in the tree or plant's life. Now, with our trees right now that are going to be going into kind of hibernation for winter, they're going to want to store all of that sugar so they can stay alive during the cold winter months. So let's look at the photosynthetic equation. It's written two ways here. Obviously, we have it textually, so you can see the words, and then we also have the molecular equation. So obviously, we have to have carbon dioxide, like I said, plus water, plus sunlight. So those three things are what we call our reactants. Okay, so just to kind of review this. And anything on the other side where the arrow is pointing are our products. So you can see over here, we have our sugar molecule and we have oxygen molecule. So this is kind of the textual thing. And some people like to read things via textual, like with words. Others like to look at the chemical formula. Now, what I want you to do with the chemical formula is look at here, the numbers are a little different. This is CO2, right? We know carbon dioxide, but the 6 in front of it tells me that there are 6 carbon dioxide molecules. Now here, again, we'd still have a plus sign here. Here's water, H2O, but wait a minute, there's a 6 in front here, which tells me there's 6 water molecules. So in order for us to have sugar production, we have to start with 6 CO2s and 6 H2O. And then we still, again, have our sunlight. Now, if we look on the other side of our equation here, where our products are, you can see there's C6H12O6. So how many molecules did we actually make? Well, because there's nothing here, we do an assumption that that's 1. So we're going to make 1 molecule. But our other byproduct, like I said, is oxygen. And how many oxygen molecules are we making? We're making 6. So when we look at this, this is what we call a balanced equation. So let me show you how that is. So if I kind of break down carbon dioxide, I have carbon and I have oxygen molecules. Now if I have 6 CO2s, that just tells me right here I have carbon, but I have 6 of them. Okay? And then oxygen, I had 2 already. We have the O2 molecule here. So this is 2 is going to multiply by that 6. So it's going to tell me that here I have 12 actual little oxygen atoms. If I move over here, what's going to happen is, again, on my H has 2, so 2 hydrogens. I'm going to multiply it by 6. That means I have actually 12 of these hydrogens on this side. And then how many oxygen do I have? I have 6. Now, if I was to look at this side, I can see I have 6 carbon. I have 12 hydrogen, but if I add my oxygens together, so I have 12 from this molecule and 6 from this molecule, I really have 18 oxygen molecules in my reactants. Now, if I look on the product side here, remember we only have 1 glucose molecule, so all I can get from here is 6 carbon, 12 hydrogen, and then 6 oxygen again. But if I look at my wonderful oxygen molecule here, I have 6 of them. So that tells me right here I have 12. Now if I was to again add these two together, I have an oxygen over on this side, which is there are 18 of them. So if I was to look at all of these on either side of the reactants, okay, I have 6 carbon. Oh, I'm reactant, check. I have 6 carbon over here on the product, check. All right, now I go back to my reactants. My next molecule is my hydrogen. I have 12 on the reactants, check. Over here on the products, I have 12 hydrogen, check. Now, remember we added our oxygen, so here we have 18 on the reactants, check. And if I come over here on the products, I have 18 checked. This is now what we call a balanced equation, meaning that all molecules are accounted for on the reactants and the product side. So just remember, as much as this equation for photosynthesis is carbon plus water plus sunlight equals sugar and oxygen, really you have 6 carbon dioxides plus 6 water molecules give me 1 sugar and 6 oxygen. So this takes place in it looks very simple. This looks like, yeah, I got that, Professor Galpin, this is great. But the problem is it's very complex and there's many steps involved. And so we're going to really look at how this is made and how it's broken down in a few moments. The glucose is what our product is that we really are trying to get, and we get that from what we call a 3-carbon Ga3P molecule. So the one thing you're going to find out when we do carbon photosynthesis is there are lots of fancy words. There's lots of enzymes playing roles here, all kinds of stuff going on, and a lot of times we use just letters and initials. So we are going to make 3-carbon Ga3P, and those molecules are going to create this one C6H12O6 molecule. So let's look at that more in depth. So we can break down photosynthesis into a couple different stages. The first stage is what we call light dependent. So a light dependent reaction. So another way they talk about here is light reaction. It's light dependent. And now where is this taking place? Well, we know, first of all this is going to take place in that organelle, the chloroplast. But specifically, the dependent reaction happens in the thylakoid membrane. So remember, this membrane is a phospholipid bilayer, just like we've continuously seen. We're going to have some electron pathways. Now remember, we talked about reduction oxidation reactions, where when a proton moves, such as a hydrogen proton, the electron follows to keep it balanced. So we're going to be talking a lot about the hydrogen ions moving as well as electrons. So this is where we talk about the electron pathways. Now, in the light-dependent kind of stage, let's say, maybe at least call it stage, we have what we call capturing, so light capturing energy. So this is where we're going to take that solar energy in what we can think of as photons, and we're going to do that in what we call photosystems. There are 2 photosystems. Photosystem, so I'm just going to go PS, 2 is first, don't ask, okay? And then photosystem 1 comes second. So I'm not sure why they were decided that way back in the day, but they were. So basically the pigments in our wonderful chloroplasts, so chlorophyll, are going to help collect these photons. And then we have electrons that are going to kind of be moving around, and we have this wonderful molecule called NAD. Don't worry about it's nickel, acid, hydrogen, right? NAD, this is where I said, go with the initials so you remember things. We will see this again in cellular respiration. So we're going to have NADs. You're going to see that we're going to have NAD phosphates sometimes, so there's our P added on, and then that hydrogen is talking about the hydrogen ion that moves around. So you're going to see these a little bit more, so let's look at this. So the basic idea is, here is our chloroplast. Whoops, sorry. Here's our chloroplast. You can see we have chlorophyll molecules throughout, and those are our pigments. The photons come in from the solar energy and they kind of move around all of these chlorophylls. You can see they're kind of moving all around. And what happens is then we have an electron donor. So something is giving off an electron. And that is important because there's an electron receptor here. But this is how we initially take in those photons through the chlorophyll molecules. Now, the photosystems, they're going to look exactly the same. So here's photosystem 2, here's photosystem 1. Photosystem 2, like I told you, comes first. Now, if you look really quickly, this is the thylakoid membrane. It's a phospholipid membrane, right, just like we've seen. And this kind of looks like a protein channel sitting inside of it. And it is a channel. That is very true. Inside this channel, you're going to see here's your chlorophyll, so your pigmenting molecules. They just look like little green structures that are here. What's going to happen is that when when the photons come into the pigments that are here, so whatever they are, chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, xanthophylls, keratin, whatever they are, the photons are going to excite these kind of what we consider light harvesting complexes, right? So all these little tiny pigments. And what's going to happen is when it excites, it basically creates the electrons that are kind of hanging around to kind of start doing their job. So you can kind of see, we have our water molecules. This is one of our reactants here. We have a water molecule, but we're going to split that water molecule. And when we do, we get a half of an oxygen, and then we have 2 of these hydrogen ions hanging around. Now we know when water is split, we are splitting that molecule, and 2 hydrogen atoms are here. So if they're here, what's going to follow them? The electrons. So when we kind of energize these pigments, we lost 2 electrons as well. So the 2 electrons are going to split and they're going to grab onto the pigment, and that's what we call that primary electron acceptor. And what you're going to see is they're actually going to kind of move outside that thylakoid membrane through the channel. So that's kind of what happens in photosystem 2. Photosystem 1 is still kind of that harvesting system where it's taking in photons. However, what's happening here is a little bit different. The electrons are coming from the water molecule up here, but in photosystem 1, the electrons are coming from the chloroplast of what we call the electron transport chain, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So we still have, so here's the electron transport chain. This is basically going to move it on over. So these are kind of sitting next to each other. Photosystem 2, so if I draw real quickly, photosystem 2 is sitting along the membrane, okay? And then we have photosystem 1 kind of sitting right next to it. So again, remember, these are kind of like a channel, right? And we knew, I just told you that one of the electrons are leaving and electrons are leaving. So the electrons are kind of leaving, but they have this like transport system. So again, it's kind of that carrier molecule that's going to move the electron from photosystem 2 over to photosystem 1. So the electrons are coming over, and you can kind of see it right here from that transport from PS2. Now, light is still coming in, so our chlorophyll is still gathering photons. And then again, the electron that's part of this is coming over from the electron transport chain. You can see there are no other reactants at this point, okay? So there's no other reactants. The electrons come from here, and again, we're going to do the same thing as where the electrons are grabbing onto the pigment. They've been energized. We have the primary electron acceptor, and it's going to kind of move out the cell, the thylakoid again. So we were to kind of look at this. Obviously, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot going on in each system. So here's system 2, here's system 1. So you can see here are these kind of little circular structures are all of our pigments. The photons are coming in. You can see our water molecule is being split. It's giving off then 2 hydrogen ions and half of an oxygen, and we have 2 electrons now. And then we're going to kind of energize. Now this is kind of that electron transport chain, like I was just saying. It's right here. So electron transport chain, ETC. And where we've taken a bunch of these hydrogen ions, and we have the electrons that left, right? They came out, and they're going to move the electrons along to the next photosystem. Now, energy is required here, right? So we need ATP. So we have another molecule that's sitting in our membrane here, okay, that actually looks like a turbine. So if you think about what a turbine is, This is our ATP synthase. This makes ATP. So it's basically going to be a little molecule that takes ADP plus phosphate and makes ATP. That's all its job is to do that. So that provides the energy that needs to happen here in the electron transport chain. From there, when we move over our electrons, obviously we're moving to this photosystem 1. Same thing's happening in this respect. We have the light energy coming in, it's absorbed inside that chlorophyll, and then we are creating the 2 electrons again that are now leaving this